speaking of misinformation, I hear a ton of people going, "Oh, but the foreclosures are coming, the forbearance, everybody's going to be, all these homes are going to flood the market." Well, one of the supply challenges has been that we've had this foreclosure moratorium since the beginning of the pandemic, which is great. I get it. I understand, help people out that were basically unable to work for stuff out of their control, right? We've got these forbearance plans, which are keeping people in their home that, maybe would have been selling. But, on a forbearance plan, they're not paying their mortgage. They're able to stay in their home without a monthly payment. Now, that's going to catch up to them at some point. They're going to have to make good on it at some point. But there are a lot of people that have been not making a payment for a year or more. So again, that's another COVID-related reason for the short supply is this, again, these foreclosures, distress sales not coming on the market. There's been a few, but it's very limited, very, very limited. It's any of the mortgages that were backed by any of the government plans, those homes are not being foreclosed. Okay, let's talk about demand. Homeownership rate dropped to a pretty big low back. I'm going to pull up this chart here from the Fed. They do some great charts, and so just give you some perspective here. In 2004, 2005, this was an all-time high. Home ownership rate in the United States was 69%. That was a really high number. However, what happened was it dropped to a low in 2016 of 62%. Which is it was a historic low. And I remember back at that time, there was all those stories. Oh, these millennials, these young people, they are not going to want to own a home. They're going to want to live in the city. They're going to want to commute to work in the Uber, and they're never going to buy a house, and they're never going to buy a car, and they're going to get their DoorDash delivered and all this. Well, in 2016, we saw a reversal, and ever since then, we've had this increase in the home ownership rate. People started to come into the fact that home ownership is great. There's tons of advantage, not just the financial, but there is a lot of other reasons. Just American dream, that whole conversation. I won't go into all that right now, but so ever since 2016, we have seen an increase in buyer demand around the country. Another part of this demand story is something I just mentioned, which is the demographics. The millennial generation is the largest demographic generation ever in American history, bigger than us boomers. What do I call myself? I'm a tailing boomer. I'm a little older, a little younger boomer. But anyway, they are the biggest generation ever. And they're right now in their prime home buyer, first-time home buyer years. And there's Logan Mashami, who's one of the economists, housing economists I follow. He's been talking about this for 2 years, that it's coming, come to 2020 through 2024, we're going to have all this big demographic of people coming into home buying age, and that's what's happened. They've moved into home buying age, and that has driven demand a lot. Okay, let's get back to this demand thing. So the demographics thing, I hit on that. Let's talk about the fact that there's a lot of people that were on the edge of buying, had kind of been on their list, let's say, pre-pandemic or pre-March last year. And a lot of people jumped into the housing market that maybe thought it was a couple years out. Low interest rates, maybe they were renters, tired of living in an apartment. I'm sure living in an apartment during COVID was awful. And so they jumped into the market. So we definitely, there was a conversation, and it's still out there, that we're borrowing buyers from the future. that was out there last year. And there may be some of that, but there's still plenty of buyers out there. Another thing that happened, obviously, is, well, this is more pandemic driven. Well, definitely pandemic driven. You know, people are working from home, they're schooling from home, they need more space, they want more space, they're spending way more time at home, they're cooking at home. People are using their kitchen that maybe they never used before, stuff like that. So that definitely created a need for people to move, and a want for people to move. So that's driven demand. Something that doesn't get reported much, and I want to talk about this, is the second home sales. Eddie, I don't know if you knew this, but second home sales are booming in the U.S. right now.
Mm-hmm.
What happened? I mean, you think about this again, these low interest rates, people, the reality is people that have a better income, have a better job, have done better through the pandemic. They can afford to buy the second home. Now they're thinking about buying that second home. Let's talk about Angel Fire, something you're very familiar with, Eddie. I talked with a realtor yesterday that works the Angel Fire market here in New Mexico, and he said it is like this weird. I mean, he said as soon as a home comes on the market, he has 20 people he could call in Dallas, and they would make an offer on that home sight unseen right now in Angel Fire. There are so many people that want a second home, and Angel Fire is booming like it never has before. And that's in a lot of second home markets. Not, that's just one small example here locally.
Well, I'll tell you, I own land up there, and I have a lot, and I've gotten several inquiries from people. And I'll tell you, I'm going to wait for the construction cost to just totally drop, and I'll go build my house for 40, 50 cents on the dollar. And I don't care if I have to wait a year or 5 years for that to happen. I'll get to capture all of the value of the upside of what they bought their house for based upon where my lot is. I mean, and that's a very lucky thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one thing that's happened just recently in the last month is the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, who backs so many mortgages in our country. They've actually put a premium, meaning they've increased interest rate for second home purchases. And when I say second home, it's vacation home. It's also investment properties. It's people have jumped into the investment property world too that may not have. And we could talk about, what rent prices have done. That's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
But that has appreciated greatly as well. So there's a lot of information there about supply and demand. And I'll just do one last thing is,
Sure.
the old catch-22 thing, right, Eddie? You've got two contrary conditions. So, this is a quote from what's his name, Ralph from House. Anyway, he's another economist that I follow. Anyway, so he said every additional home that gets pulled off the market, meaning somebody decides not to sell, that incentivize someone else not to sell their house because now they can't find anything. So we are in this kind of self-reinforcing cycle where, well, I want to buy, but I can't find anything. So I'm not going to put my home on the market, which will free it up for somebody else who wants to put their home on the market. So we're in this kind of vicious cycle right now. I will tell you one thing. There's been a lot of predictions that we will see an increase in the number of homes coming into later this year. Just this week, we did see a pretty, I want to say decent, but we did see an increase in the number of homes on the market in the Albuquerque area. But I will tell you, it's held pretty steady now for a couple months even, where, we've got 400 or so on and 400 or so off every week in the Albuquerque area.